A dark king wakes up in terror in the middle of the night. In his dream, he has seen that a boy who has not even grown up yet will one day destroy his kingdom. Terrified, the king orders his men to find the child. The child's father is killed. His mother realizes that if she waits even a moment longer, her son will not survive either. So she secretly takes him away from the center of power. The child grows up far from the royal court, far from the throne, and far from the truth about his family. Years pass. The boy grows up and finally discovers who he really is. He learns that the same dark ruler killed his father, and that the people he may one day protect are still living under the tyrant's rule. So he leaves his hiding place. He takes up a symbolic weapon. The people and the rebels gather behind him. He attacks the dark ruler's palace, overthrows his reign, and eventually becomes king. Wait, that was the story of Aragorn, right? The hidden heir of an ancient bloodline, a father killed during his childhood, a mother who takes him somewhere safe, a boy raised far from the throne under a hidden identity who returns years later in the darkest hour to save a kingdom. Everything sounds like Aragorn's story, but no. This is not Aragorn. This is the story of Fereydun, one of the greatest kings in the Shahnameh, and the dark ruler who feared his birth was Zahak. This story was written nearly 1,000 years before The Lord of the Rings was published, and what makes it even stranger is that the similarity is not limited to one scene. Almost the entire life journey of these two characters contains astonishing parallels.
But Fereydun and Aragorn are only the beginning, because in this same world, there is a prince whose tragedy feels like the stories of Ned Stark and Robb Stark combined. There is a boy who carries the blood of two enemy dynasties while his true identity is hidden to keep him alive. Jon Snow? No, this one is Khosrow. Then, we reach a war that begins with the jealousy of three brothers, but continues for generations. We reach a golden civilization that falls not because of its enemies, but because of its own pride. And finally, we reach a parallel in which four elements align almost perfectly: a nearly invulnerable figure, a hidden weakness, a bird that reveals the secret, and a special arrow aimed directly at that vulnerable point. You may think I am talking about Smaug and Bard's black arrow, but this story was told in the Shahnameh centuries before The Hobbit was written. So, the central question of this video is, were Tolkien and George R.R. Martin inspired by the Shahnameh? Are we looking at an indirect influence? Are all of these similarities merely coincidences? Or are these three worlds different branches of a much older mythological tree? By the end of this video, we will examine these parallels one by one, and at the end, without bias or exaggeration, we will deliver the final verdict. So, let us begin with the first major parallel: the hidden heir feared by a dark ruler before he had even grown up.
Thief!
Now that we know Fereydun's name, let us examine the story more closely. The dark ruler in this story is Zahak, a king who, in the Shahnameh, has two serpents growing from his shoulders. And every day, the brains of young people are sacrificed to feed them. But one night, Zahak has a terrifying dream. He sees a young man carrying a mace shaped like the head of a bull, a young man who will one day destroy his rule. That young man is Fereydun. From that moment on, Zahak fears a child who is not even strong enough to defend himself. Fereydun's father, Abtin, is captured and killed. Faranach, Fereydun's mother, realizes that if Zahak's men find her son, they will kill him too. So she hides Fereydun. For a time, she leaves him with the keeper of a miraculous cow named Barmaya. Fereydun is raised on the milk of this cow. But when his hiding place is threatened, Faranach is forced to move the child again. This time, she takes him to the Alborz Mountains. Fereydun grows up far from the court, far from power, far from the crown, and without knowing the complete truth about his family. Years later, he asks his mother, "Who am I really? What happened to my father, and why did I spend my entire childhood in hiding?" Faranak tells him the truth. "Your father was killed by Zahak's regime, and people are still being sacrificed every day to preserve his power." Fereydun decides to return. A mace shaped like the head of a bull is made for him. At the same time, another man has risen against Zahak. Not a prince, not a great commander, a blacksmith. His name is Kaveh. Kaveh's children have been sacrificed by Zahak's regime. He places his leather blacksmith's apron on the end of a spear and turns it into the banner of the rebellion. The people gather behind Kaveh, and Kaveh leads them toward Fereydun. The hidden heir and the people's uprising come together. Fereydun enters Zahak's palace and defeats him. But this part is extremely important. Fereydun does not kill Zahak. When he prepares to deliver the final blow, Soros stops him. Fereydun takes Zahak to Mount Damavand and chains him there. The dark reign comes to an end, and Fereydun becomes king. Now look at Aragorn again. Aragorn's father is killed when he is only 2 years old. His mother takes him to Rivendell so that he can grow up in safety. His true identity remains hidden. Even Aragorn himself does not know who he truly is during his childhood. He is called Estel, meaning hope. Years later, Elrond reveals the truth to him. Aragorn is the heir of Isildur and the surviving descendant of an ancient royal line. His family's broken sword, Narsil, is reforged and renamed Anduril. Aragorn spends years living far from the throne. He travels, he fights under different names, and he reveals his true identity at the exact moment when the world is standing on the edge of destruction. He unites the free peoples, he leads the armies of the West, and he marches toward the Black Gate. But Aragorn does not kill Sauron either. His attack on the Black Gate is a diversion. He draws Sauron's attention toward himself so that Frodo and Sam can reach Mount Doom. The ring is destroyed, Sauron's power collapses, and Aragorn becomes king. Now, place the chain of events side by side. A father killed during the hero's childhood, a mother who hides her child to keep him alive, a royal heir raised far from power, an identity hidden from the enemy, a symbolic weapon.
A return during a moment of crisis, the unification of the people, the end of a dark reign, and a coronation. Of course, the differences matter. Fereydun directly defeats and captures Zahak. Aragorn creates the conditions necessary for Sauron's power to be destroyed by drawing his attention away. Fereydun does not literally reclaim his father's throne, but Aragorn restores his ancient royal dynasty. So these two are not the same character, but their journeys are strangely similar. Still, the hidden heir is an ancient and relatively common narrative pattern, so it is too early to judge, but the next parallel is much darker. This time, honor itself becomes a death sentence. A young prince enters a royal court filled with lies, jealousy, and conspiracy. He is an honorable man, he is loyal to the truth, and he refuses to abandon his principles in order to gain power. But in a court like this, honor is not always a strength. Sometimes it is a deadly weakness. A powerful woman falls in love with him. The prince rejects her. To take revenge, she creates a terrible accusation. To prove his innocence, the prince is forced to face a trial no ordinary human should survive. 2 enormous walls of fire are built. He rides his horse directly into the flames and emerges completely unharmed on the other side. The truth is proven, but the truth cannot save him. Later, he establishes a peace treaty between his own country and the enemy kingdom. Hostages are exchanged. He promises to remain loyal to the treaty, but his father and king orders him to break it, to place the hostages in chains and restart the war. The prince faces an impossible choice: obey his father or remain loyal to the oath he has given. He chooses honor. But after making that choice, he can no longer safely return home, so he travels to the enemy kingdom. At first, he is welcomed with respect. He marries the king's daughter. He is given land. He builds a city. And for a moment, it seems possible that this marriage may finally end the war between the two nations. But a jealous man begins spreading lies. He alters messages. He convinces the king that the prince is planning a betrayal. And in the end, the innocent prince is killed. Did you think this was the story of Ned Stark, an honorable man in a corrupt court, destroyed by lies and executed by the king's command? Or perhaps Robb Stark, a man who trusted a political agreement and was eventually killed inside the territory of his allies? No. This is the story of Siavash, one of the most tragic characters in the Shahnameh. Sudabe falsely accuses him. Siavash passes through fire to prove his innocence. Later, during the war with Turan, he makes a peace treaty with Afrasiab, but Kaikavas, his father, orders him to break the treaty. Siavash refuses, because to him, breaking an oath is worse than losing the throne. He goes to Turan. Afrasiab initially welcomes him. Siavash marries Ferengis, Afrasiab's daughter, and he builds the city of Siavashgard. But Garsiwaz, Afrasiab's brother, becomes afraid of Siavash's position. He creates lies and turns Afrasiab against Siavash. Siavash is captured, and despite his innocence, he loses his life. But his death is not the end of the story. The blood of Siavash becomes a wound that future generations are forced to carry. His son, Khosrow, will one day return to avenge his father. Now look at Ned Stark. He is also an honorable man who enters a court filled with lies. He discovers a truth that could destroy the monarchy. Joffrey is not Robert Baratheon's true son. But in a world where others use lies as weapons, Ned remains loyal to honor. He is captured. To protect his daughters, he confesses a crime he did not commit. He is promised that he will live, but he is executed in front of the people. Then look at Robb Stark. He makes a marriage agreement with House Frey, but breaks that agreement. When he enters the Frey's castle again, he is under the protection of guest right. He has eaten the host's bread and salt. According to a sacred law, he should not be harmed. But that very law is broken. Robb, his mother, and many of his followers are massacred at the Red Wedding. These three stories are not identical. Siavash does not break a marriage agreement. In fact, he is destroyed precisely because he refuses to break his own treaty. Ned is executed after making a false confession. Robb becomes the victim of betrayal inside his host's home. But when we place these three journeys side by side, we see a strange pattern. An honorable figure in a corrupt world, a promise with political consequences, a lie that defeats the truth, a ruler who violates a promise of safety, an unjust death, and a generation that inherits war and vengeance. Martin has said that the Red Wedding was inspired by events from Scottish history, especially the Black Dinner and the Massacre of Glencoe. So we have no reason to claim that he took this story from Siavash. But here is what makes it extraordinary. Nearly 1,000 years before A Storm of Swords, the Shahnameh had already told this deadly collision between honor, politics, promises, betrayal, and generational revenge. And now we come to another parallel, a child carrying the blood of two enemy dynasties. A boy is born in enemy territory. His father was killed before he was born. His mother is the daughter of the same king who ordered his father's death. The blood of two rival royal houses runs through the child's veins. If the king discovers who the child really is, he may see him as the greatest threat to the future of his rule. So, the child's identity is hidden. He grows up far from the royal court, among shepherds. Years later, a warrior from his father's homeland enters enemy territory to find him. The search continues for years. Eventually, the missing heir is discovered, and he returns to his father's homeland with his mother. But royal blood is not enough. He must prove that he deserves the crown. He has a rival claimant. So, a test is established. The one who can conquer an enchanted fortress will prove his worth. The rival fails, but the hidden heir succeeds. Did you think this was Jon Snow? A boy with a secret identity, a father killed before his birth, a mother from the rival house, and the blood of two enemy dynasties. No, this is the story of Khosrow, the son of Siavash and Daenerys. Siavash is a prince of Iran.
Ferengis is the daughter of Afrasiab, king of Tehran. Khosrow is born in Tehran, in the same land where his father was killed. Piran, a wise Turanian warrior, protects him. He's raised far from the royal court and among shepherds, so that Afrasiab will not discover the threat growing inside his own kingdom. Years later, Give, an Iranian hero, enters Tehran to find Siavash's son. His search lasts for years. Eventually, he finds Khosrow and brings him and Ferengis back to Iran. But Khosrow does not gain the crown only because of his royal blood. Fereydun is also a claimant to the throne. So, a test is established, the conquest of the enchanted fortress of Baman. Fereydun fails, Khosrow succeeds. His ancestry gives him the right to claim the throne, but his actions prove that he deserves it. Now, look at Jon Snow. In the television series Game of Thrones, Jon is revealed to be the son of Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark. Rhaegar is killed before Jon is born. Lyanna dies during childbirth. Ned Stark knows that if the truth is revealed, Robert Baratheon will consider the child a Targaryen threat, so he hides Jon's identity. He raises him as his own illegitimate son. Jon does not know that both Stark and Targaryen blood run through his veins. Now, place the similarities side by side. A father killed before knowing his child, a mother from the rival dynasty, a child carrying the blood of both sides of the war, an identity hidden to keep him alive, growing up far from his true position, and the revelation of a truth capable of changing the entire political order. But the differences matter.
Khosrow is hidden inside enemy territory. Jon is raised among his mother's relatives. Khosrow returns to Iran and becomes king. Jon does not sit on the Iron Throne at the end of the series. So, Khosrow is not an Iranian Jon Snow. But both characters bring the same question to life. When the blood of two enemies is united inside one person, which side does he belong to? Or perhaps he is the only person capable of changing the fate of both sides. But this war did not begin with Khosrow. To understand it, we have to go back several generations, to 3 brothers and a single murder. A powerful king divides the world among his 3 sons. The eldest son receives the western lands, the second son receives the eastern lands, and the youngest son receives the most important part of the kingdom. The 2 older brothers believe that their father has treated them unjustly. Jealousy becomes hatred. But the youngest brother does not approach them seeking war. He comes seeking peace. He is even prepared to give up his power just to prevent the blood of brothers from being spilled. But the 2 older brothers kill him. This murder is not the end of a family disagreement. It is the beginning of a war that will continue for generations. Children, grandchildren, and future descendants inherit a hatred they did not create. Did you think this was the history of one of the great houses of Westeros? No,
This is the story of Fereydun's 3 sons, Salm, Tur, and Iraj. Fereydun divides his kingdom among them. The western lands go to Salm, the eastern lands and Turan go to Tur, and Iran goes to Iraj, the youngest brother.
Salm and Tur believe that Iraj has been given the best portion. Iraj does not approach them seeking war, he comes seeking peace. But his 2 brothers kill him, and from that moment, one family murder becomes a war lasting from generation to generation. Iraj's descendants seek revenge. Manizheh avenges his blood, and the war between Iran and Turan repeatedly erupts around the memory of that ancient wound. Children continue the wars of their fathers. Every act of revenge creates the next. The dead continue to make decisions for the living. In Game of Thrones, there is no exact equivalent to Fereydun dividing the world among his 3 sons, but the engine of the story is extremely familiar. Land is not merely soil, it is the inheritance of a family. Marriage is not merely love, it is a political contract. The murder of one person is not merely a personal crime, it is a declaration of war against their entire name and bloodline. Ned Stark is killed and the North rises. Robb Stark is killed and the wound of House Stark grows deeper. The Targaryens are overthrown, but their surviving descendants still carry a claim to the throne. Children inherit wars that began before they were born. This is not a one-to-one match, it is a shared, tragic idea. A country can remain imprisoned inside a family wound for generations. The next story is not about a hidden heir or a murdered prince. It is about a golden age destroyed by its own pride. A king rises to power and changes the world. During his reign, art, industry, medicine, clothing, construction, and social order advance. The people live in prosperity. Suffering decreases. The world enters a golden age.
If they look to me, it is because I have not failed them.
But if King Jamshid goes too high, how will he hear us when the gears jam?
But the king slowly forgets where this glory came from. He begins to believe that all the greatness in the world exists because of him alone. Success turns into self-worship. The people lose their trust. The king's legitimacy collapses, and a civilization that believed nothing could destroy it falls from within. Did you think this was the story of Númenor, the great civilization of men whose power, wealth, and knowledge eventually turned into pride? No, this is the story of Jamshid. Jamshid begins as a great king and builder of civilization. The Shahnameh connects his age with the growth of art, crafts, clothing, construction, medicine, and social order. His world enters an age of glory. But Jamshid slowly begins to claim all of this greatness for himself. He believes that the people owe everything they possess to him alone. Pride destroys his connection to the source of his legitimacy. The royal glory, the far, leaves him. The people turn away from him. The order he created collapses, and the path is opened for the rise of Zahak. Now look at Númenor, the greatest civilization of men in Tolkien's world. A people with long lives, great knowledge, naval power, wealth, and a land given to them as a reward. But the more powerful they become, the more they fear death. They envy the immortality of the elves. They believe they deserve more than they have been given. Sauron enters Númenor as a prisoner, but gradually becomes the king's advisor. He transforms the people's fear into pride, and their pride into rebellion. Eventually, Ar-Pharazôn believes he can seize immortality by force. He attacks Aman, and Númenor is destroyed beneath the sea. The stories are not identical. Jamshid is one king, Númenor is an entire civilization. Sauron corrupts Númenor from within, but Jamshid's fall opens the path for Zahak.
Tolkien also connected Númenor with the legend of Atlantis, but the moral structure of the two stories is extremely similar. A golden age, knowledge and prosperity, a feeling of superiority, success turning into pride, the loss of legitimacy, and a collapse caused not by weakness, but the corruption of greatness itself. Nearly 1,000 years before The Lord of the Rings was published, the Shahnameh had already shown that the greatest powers may be destroyed not by their enemies, but by the image they create of themselves. And now, we leave kings and wars behind for a story of forbidden love inside enemy territory. A warrior enters enemy territory. The king's daughter sees him and falls in love with him. They secretly meet, but their relationship is discovered. The king becomes furious. The man is arrested and thrown into a deep pit. The woman loses her position, her wealth, and her royal life. She is thrown out of the palace. But she refuses to abandon the man she loves. She remains near his prison. She finds food for him and does everything she can to keep him alive. Did you think this was the story of Beren and Lúthien, a princess who defies her father and enters danger to save a man from another world? No, this is the story of Bijan and Manizheh. Bijan, an Iranian warrior, is sent near the border to destroy wild boars. After completing his mission, he enters Tehran.
Who is she? This woman you sing of.
It is the Lady of Lúthien, the elf maiden who gave her love to Beren. I'm mortal.
What happened to her?
She died. Get some sleep, Frodo.
There, Manizheh, the daughter of Afrasib, sees him. The two fall in love. Manizheh secretly brings Bijan into the palace, but their relationship is discovered. Afrasib becomes furious. Bijan is arrested and thrown into a deep pit sealed by a massive stone. Manizheh loses her status and wealth. She is cast out of the palace, but she refuses to abandon Bijan. She remains beside the pit. She finds food for him and keeps him alive. In Iran, Khosrow uses his world-revealing cup to discover that Bijan is still alive. Rostam enters Turan disguised as a merchant. Manizheh finds him, shows him the location of the pit, and opens the path to Bijan's rescue. Now look at Beren and Lúthien. Beren is a mortal man. Lúthien is an immortal elf and the daughter of King Thingol. They fall in love, but Thingol opposes their marriage. He gives Beren an almost impossible task. He must remove one of the Silmarils from Morgoth's crown. During the quest, Beren is captured by Sauron. Lúthien acts against her father's command. With the help of Hoenn, she reaches Sauron's fortress, defeats his power, and frees Beren. In both stories, we see a man from outside entering the woman's world, the king's daughter falling in love with him, the father opposing the relationship, the man being imprisoned, the woman losing the protection and security of the royal court and becoming the main force behind the man's rescue. But the differences matter again. Thingol is not the king of Beren's enemy nation. Beren is not imprisoned only because of his love. Lúthien directly defeats Sauron.
I call the light to break the dark.
But in the Shahnameh, Rostam physically rescues Bijan, while Manizheh makes that rescue possible. Tolkien also connected the character of Lúthien deeply with his wife Edith. So we have no evidence that Bijan and Manizheh served as the source for Beren and Lúthien, but the structural resemblance remains fascinating. In both stories, the princess does not wait for a man to rescue her. She enters danger in order to save the man she loves. Before we reach the final comparison I promised at the beginning, let us look at 3 faster similarities. First, a king possesses a magical object that allows him to see distant people and events. He uses it to locate a missing warrior. A Palantir? No, this is Kai Khosrow's world-revealing cup. In Tolkien's world, the Palantiri are also used to see and communicate across great distances. Their functions are similar, but we have no evidence that Tolkien used Kai Khosrow's cup as the source for the Palantiri. Then there is a royal figure who enters a massive fire and walks out alive, Daenerys. This time, the image is familiar, but the first story belongs to Siavash. In Tolkien, the first fire was the courageous act of Feanor, who refused Valor and the light of the 2 trees. Siavash enters the fire to prove his innocence. Daenerys enters the flames during Khal Drogo's funeral pyre and emerges with the birth of her dragons. The image is similar, but its meaning is different. For Siavash, the fire is a trial of innocence. For Daenerys, it is a magical moment of transformation and rebirth. And then there is a magnificent, enormous creature that descends from the sky. At the moment when escape seems impossible, it saves the hero. Tolkien's eagles? Not only them.
Centuries earlier, the Simurgh played such a role in the Shahnameh, but the Simurgh is not merely a means of rescue. She raises Zal. She explains how Rostam can be safely delivered at birth. She heals the wounds of Rostam and Raksh, and she possesses knowledge no human being has. Tolkien's eagles are also intelligent and powerful creatures who carry messages, appear in battles, and rescue heroes. But the Simurgh is also a mother, a healer, and a teacher. So these 2 are not direct equivalents. And now we have reached the comparison I promised at the beginning. A hidden weakness, a bird carrying the secret, and one final arrow. A warrior is nearly impossible to defeat. Ordinary weapons cannot wound his body. The hero fighting him is defeated and badly injured. Then, a mysterious bird enters the story. The bird reveals the warrior's hidden weakness. The hero prepares a special arrow and aims it directly at the vulnerable point. Did you think this was Smaug, a dragon with an almost impenetrable body, one unarmored point, a bird that tells Bard the secret, and a black arrow aimed directly at that weakness? No. The first story is the story of Rostam and Esfandiyar. Esfandiyar is almost invulnerable. Rostam cannot defeat him with ordinary weapons. Rostam and Raksh are badly injured in battle. The Simurgh heals them and reveals the secret of Esfandiyar's weakness, his eyes. Rostam prepares a special arrow made from tamarisk wood and strikes the vulnerable point. Now look at Smaug. The dragon's body is protected by scales and embedded treasure, but there is an unarmored point underneath his body.
A thrush carries this secret to Bard. Bard prepares his black arrow and aims directly at that point. 4 stages, a nearly invulnerable body, a hidden weakness, a bird that communicates the secret, and a special arrow aimed at the vulnerable point. This is one of the most precise visual similarities between the Shahnameh and Tolkien's works. But this very similarity may be the greatest trap of the entire video. Why? Because Esfandiyar is a tragic human prince and hero. Smaug is a greedy dragon. Their characters, positions, and meanings are completely different. The similarity exists only in the mechanism of defeat.
And this is exactly the mistake we must avoid, seeing an astonishing similarity and turning it into a claim for which we have no evidence. Now, it is time for the final verdict. Do we have a letter, interview, note, or direct piece of evidence in which Tolkien or George R.R. Martin says that they took these stories from the Shahnameh? No. There is no conclusive, widely accepted evidence of direct copying. Tolkien spoke about many of his inspirations, the Kalevala and the story of Kulvero, Beowulf, the myths and literature of Northern Europe, linguistics, medieval literature, his own religious worldview, and his personal experiences. Martin has also spoken about medieval European history, the Wars of the Roses, the 100 Years' War, the Crusades, Scottish history, historical novels, and Tolkien himself. So we cannot ignore the sources that the authors themselves named.
But could Tolkien have encountered stories from the Shahnameh? Yes, it was possible. An abridged English version of the Shahnameh was published in 1832. Matthew Arnold also published the long poem Sohrab and Rustum in 1853. That means stories from the Shahnameh had entered English language literary culture decades before Tolkien was born, so access was possible. But possibility is not evidence that he read it, and reading something is not by itself evidence of inspiration. The second possibility is indirect influence. Stories may have entered later works through translations, retellings, or the broader literary environment, without leaving a trail that we can clearly identify today. That possibility exists, but it has not been proven. And the third possibility? These stories may be different branches of a very ancient tree. The hidden heir, the rightful king, the invulnerable hero, forbidden love, family revenge, the battle with the dragon, the trial by fire, and the fall of a golden age do not belong to only one culture. Some of these patterns may have emerged from ancient and interconnected traditions. Others may have developed independently because people in different parts of the world have faced similar fears and desires. Fear of death, betrayal, the hunger for power, pride, love, family, and revenge. So, the accurate verdict is direct copying has not been proven. Indirect influence is possible, but there is not enough evidence. Common roots and shared patterns probably explain at least some of the similarities.
But this conclusion does not make the comparison any less exciting. In fact, it makes the real point even clearer. The purpose of this video was not to accuse Tolkien or George R.R. Martin of theft or copying. We love The Lord of the Rings. We love Martin's world in Game of Thrones. And if reliable evidence is ever discovered proving that they truly encountered Iranian stories and were inspired by them, then honestly, we should say good for them, respect. Because a great artist does not simply repeat a story. They bring it into their own world, transform it, combine it with their own experience, philosophy, and imagination, and create something new. But the real purpose of this video was something else. We wanted to tell fantasy fans around the world, if you love hidden heirs, rival houses, mad kings, forbidden love, fallen civilizations, dragons, prophecies, broken promises, and family tragedies, there is another world you need to discover. A world completed in written form nearly 1,000 years before The Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones were published, but whose stories are still alive. The Shahnameh is not only the story of Rostam and Sohrab, it is an enormous world. A world filled with kings, heroes, tragic princes, powerful women, divs, sorcerers, dragons, mythical creatures, family wars, prophecies, love, betrayal, and characters forced to choose between power, family, duty, love, and destiny. These stories are not only about the past. We still see people like Jamshid, people who become trapped by their own pride at the height of their success.
Perhaps that is why the Shahnameh is still alive after more than 1,000 years. Because the Shahnameh is not only about the past, it is about power, it is about family, love, betrayal, pride, and the choices that change human destiny. And now we want to bring this world back to life. We are creating an epic series based on the Shahnameh, from the beginning, story by story, and character by character. We want to bring its kingdoms, heroes, mythical creatures, love stories, betrayals, and battles to the screen as a real series. And you will not be just a spectator on this journey. Tell us in the comments, which character's story would you like to see first? Rostam? Zahak? Siavash? Khosrow? Manizheh? Or a character you believe the world has forgotten? Your answer may influence the future episodes of this series, so subscribe to the channel and join us from the very first chapter of this journey. And if you are interested in writing, design, music, research, voice acting, or helping build this world, you may even have the chance to become part of the creative team behind the series. This is not just a retelling of the Shahnameh. With your help, we want to enter its world. This is only the beginning.